Good morning or good afternoon, maybe good evening. Whenever you're watching this, you've got some questions. I might have some answers. Let's talk some Chiefs. Welcome to the Chief of the North Thursdays. I'm Seth Kaiser, the Chief of the North. It's always great to see you guys again. You know the drill by now. And if you don't, I guess I'll run you through it. We go through mailbag questions here. I ask for them in the comment section below, or I ask for them on Twitter every Wednesday, and then I answer them here on Thursdays. So if you have a mailbag question that you want to submit, you can, like I said, don't comment during the live stream, which is over here. Maybe it's over here. I can't remember. Either way. Instead, comment in the comment section below. I've got a couple from last week. I'll start with those every week, and then I'll move on to the ones that I've got from Twitter. Every Wednesday, I'll tweet out asking for mailbag questions. You reply to that. That's how you end up here. I did have someone email me this week asking if that was the right way to do it. Technically, no, but I'm going to try to get to that as well. We do this every Thursday here. You know the drill by now, right? Right? Yeah. So we're going to get right into it because, frankly, the amount of time that I have is very finite today. And so we're going to get right into it, starting with Bert Rojas. It's got to be Rojas. That's got to be a soft J, right? You put the question marks beforehand. What you said was more of a statement, though. And so I'll just roll into it here. Bert says, I said it in the offseason. OBJ will not regret not accepting contract Chiefs offered him. If he doesn't improve in his performance, he may not be a Chief in 2023. He can kiss goodbye top left tackle money. Not really a question, despite the question marks in front of it. That said, Orlando Brown has played significantly better the last several weeks. But you're not wrong with the fact that you can't put together an uneven performance, generally speaking, and expect to improve your chances at a top-end contract. The big thing for Brown, though, honestly, and my good friend Nate Taylor, he's often talking about this, that really what's going to matter for him, and this is definitely true, whether fans agree with it or not. What's going to really matter is how he plays in December, January, February. If he pulls together a strong performance down the stretch, he'll still get a really good offer. He's got high-end physical traits, although he does have some physical limitations as well. He's got good pedigree. He's got Pro Bowls. He'll have an easy explanation for why he started the season slow, because he's been playing on a bad knee. So really, for him, a lot depends on what he does from here on out. If he's not able to improve on things, then yes, I definitely think he'll regret not taking the offer the Chiefs made. Frankie Gumdrops, great name, asks, Seth, is it tiring being the GOAT of Chiefs talk? I'm not sure. You should probably if you were gonna talk about the GOAT of Chiefs talk, you should probably ask my good friends Josh Briscoe and Nate Taylor, maybe Ryan here or Dan, maybe some of the good fellas at KCSN. You can ask any of them if it's tiring being the GOAT of Chiefs talk. Matty V. There's so many guys that are doing this really, really well. The fact that I might even be in the conversation, I appreciate. He said with a lot of humility. But I really appreciate the compliment. Darnell Hubbard asks, how good is Burns? It would be a waste of money to bring in some other personnel. He has to be a top rusher for top money. So my understanding, because I had a few questions about Brian Burns, the rumors that are going around in the Twitterverse after the Eagles traded for Robert Quinn is that they pushed hard for Burns. Rumors are that the Panthers have turned down 2 first-round picks for Burns, which frankly I think is insane given where they're at in their team building process and where he's at contract-wise. But he's a really good player. They view him as a foundational guy. So I don't think Burns is really a guy on the table unless what they're doing is just trying to, push that price. It's claim that they've turned down 2 firsts just to see if some team will actually offer them that. I have a hard time believing someone did that, but who knows? It's hard to say. That's almost, you're getting to quarterback pricing at that point. So if he's not available, it's the way it sounds, at least for a reasonable price. I don't think you can trade 2 first-round picks for a pass rusher, unless you were getting someone like an Aaron Donald or like a Bosa or something like that. And Brian Burns is a good player, but he's not on that level of one of the Bosas or TJ Watt or something like that, or Myles Garrett. And that's what you would need to get. And even then, it's an iffy proposition there. In email, Pass Low asks regarding the eternal CEH versus Pacheco debate. I find myself wanting to see more Jerick McKinnon. He's hit a ton of big plays the last few weeks. His acceleration makes me wonder if his running style is best with the kind of plays the Chief often call. Am I wrong to think it? I like McKinnon a lot. I do think that he's got good acceleration. He's got decent vision to pick through things. He is undersized, and that comes through anytime he gets hit in terms of running the ball between the tackles. So I think that's why you're not going to see him in large amounts. You're going to see him more on in pass protection, which despite his size, he's a great pass protecting running back. But you're going to see him in pass protection. You're going to see him running screens. You're going to see him more in the passing down stuff with some runs mixed in to kind of keep defenses honest on it. I think you're going to see more and more Pacheco. So that's something just because Clyde played well against the Niners, but you can see the difference in terms of their speed. A good example of this is the play where that was called back due to a holding penalty on Toney because he tackled the guy. And the thing that occurred there though is Pacheco really had to go down the entire line and hit the edge and beat a couple of linebackers there. That's something that Clyde Edwards-Helaire has struggled to do, and it's ended up being, a tackle and basically at the line of scrimmage. With Pacheco was about 8 yards past it, because if you can just turn that corner and beat those angles, it makes all the difference in the world. Pacheco can do that. Clyde can't. In terms of Pacheco versus McKinnon, Pacheco's just bigger. He's stronger. He falls forward for more yardage. He's probably more durable. McKinnon struggled with that. But also he's got higher top end speed. McKinnon accelerates as well, but he doesn't have quite the same top end speed. Another question asked here that a lot of you asked, so I might end up skipping down some later. Pass asks, I really felt like the Chiefs had turned a corner with the run defense earlier in the year. Then the Raiders game, I feel, changed that. Considering the propensity of the defense to give up big plays in the run game, do you think it's more of a schematic issue than personnel? Here's the problem. I mean, they really have 3 games in a row, the Raiders, the Bills, and then the Niners. They've really been gashed on the ground. And so something needs to change, whether that's a personnel thing. As you can see, I don't struggle to pay attention to things. Whether it's a personnel thing or a schematic thing, Spags, just do the schematic stuff. Spags has never minded giving up yards on the ground. One can call it analytics. I don't know if that's the basis for it, but he doesn't mind giving up yardage on the ground overly much, provided that they can be really strong against the pass, and provided it's not 7-yard gain, 7-yard gain, 7-yard gain, 7-yard gain, 7-yard gain over and over and over again. That's a very different thing from giving up a 21-yard gain and then stuffing the run twice. And the reason those two things are very different, even they end up with the same average of 7 yards per carry, is that it sets the offense behind the sticks if they get stuffed. And that's one of the reasons why the running game is really tough to base an offense around, because even if you're good at it, even if you're averaging 7 or 8 yards a carry, and that's when you really should be running the ball more, when you're averaging that much, you end up behind the sticks occasionally because it's not that 7, 7, 7, 7, 7. It's more like, 20 and then 10 and then 1 and then 1 and then 3 and then 10. And then it's hard to do that consistency with the run game. So all that said, I do think it's a concern. I think it's something the Chiefs need to address. Whether or not they're able to is another matter entirely. I do think that they're going to need to see improved play against the run from Nick Bolton in terms of taking on blockers. I think you're going to need to see more of Willie Gay Jr. on the field. And I think the defensive line needs to do a better job eating blocks. I don't think Derek Nottie has been as good as he's been in previous years against the run. The Raiders bullied him quite a bit. I'm curious whether or not they bring in Shelton. They've got this huge wide body sitting on the bench that has traditionally been very strong against the run and been a double team eating guy. Like, that's what he does. That's what he's made a long career out of doing. So I am curious whether or not they shift to that, but some of it is indeed schematic. All right, we're going to get to the Twitter ones. We are going to try to roll through as many of these as possible. So if you feel like I don't give your question the attention it deserves, well, I'm sorry. Jiffy asks, I hear that KC is top 10 in sacks and pressures this year. If this is the case, why is it so imperative that they upgrade at the edge position? It's a really, really great question and really well framed. So I would say that for a couple reasons. One, it's worth noting that with a 7-game sample size, things change quickly. They were not top 10 in sacks prior to the Niners game. Chris Jones went off. Frank Clark had a couple of sacks. And those were, at least one of them was due to the work that Jones put in. Another one was kind of Jimmy G's fault, honestly. But while they have been able to get some pressure, it's not consistent. It's overly dependent on blitz packages, which is so say against the Bills, they were able to get pressure on Josh Allen. It definitely didn't feel like it though, because they couldn't really do it usually without blitzing. Now, part of that was because the Bills were very successful on first and second down, and that kind of went overlooked. That when you're not facing very many third and any sort of long, it's tough to generate consistent pressure. They had some, but not as many as they'd like. They just haven't been able to consistently force any kind of consistent pressure with 4 guys, which is what happens when you have one superstar, which they do in Jones, that you can slide protections towards and all that stuff. You have one superstar and then a bunch of average guys. It's great to have average guys rushing the passer, but, and I've talked about this a lot recently, you need, if you're rushing the passer, if you want to be consistently really good at it, you need 3 guys, as in, like, you either need 3 guys that are all good or at the very least above average, or you need 2 stars. Then you can surround them with average pass rushers and get really good results. But you generally speaking need 3 guys. So you need, like, a superstar, a really good player, and an above average player. There's got to be those 3 guys. I keep going with that over and over again. And the Chiefs don't have that. They've got one right now. Then they've got a bunch of guys who are maybe lowercase g, where there's nothing wrong with Carlos Dunlap and how he's played this year, but it hasn't been above average. It hasn't been even how Melvin Ingram played last year. Frank Clark has been better this year, but he's still average when it comes to rushing the passer right now, at least with what we see. Same with Mike Dana. These are things that need to be better. Karlaftis shows some flashes, but not a ton of winning one-on-one on his own. All his wins have generally come within the framework of executing the defense. That's great, but it's also not winning one-on-one. And that's the problem, is you don't get a lot of consistencies there. Then you've got to make up for it by blitzing like they did against the Bills. And when you live and die by the blitz, you're going to make some big plays. You're going to give up some big plays. And that's exactly what happened. So that's why I think it would be important, is against the best teams, you want to be able to generate pressure with 4. And that's not something they've been able to do. Now, they did it against the Niners. They're starting to try to do it more with alignment to get Jones manufactured one-on-one looks, and that'll help. But it's still not a consistent solution, in my opinion. Spardislayer. Okay. I think Hunt wants to have a pick in round 1 in 2023. Saying that, what scenario does Veach convince him to make a major trade before the deadline that uses our pick? The first round pick? I mean, I think it would have to be something. It would have to be, for one, a guy who's relatively young. They're not going to trade away a major asset for guys like, Orlando Brown Jr. was young, Frank Clark was young. Those assets are reserved for young players that you think will be part of the team for, the next 5 to 8 years, ideally, that you might at least get one major contract out of them. And so I think it would have to be a scenario where some, like the Brian Burns type scenario, where some guy who you have some contractual control over for the next year or two, who is also young and is also a high level player. I think that it'll be tough to find that combination of guys. James P says, Spags has been forced to move cornerbacks around for matchups to protect the young guys here lately. Yes. If so, when McDuffie returns, do you want to see Spags continuing to line for matchups, or back to left cornerback, right cornerback, no flipping? Has traveling worked? Thanks. I haven't seen as much traveling. Generally speaking, that's something Spags has tried to stay away from. You've seen a little bit more than with Snead, but I haven't seen a ton of it, honestly. Generally speaking, Spags is who he is. He expects guys to run and execute his system. I think you're going to just see that consistently. That said, they definitely do need McDuffie back, and hopefully he comes back and he plays. All we've got is a small sample size of preseason, and then 30 snaps, give or take, against the Cardinals, where he played really, really well, but we don't know if that's the baseline. But if it is, then suddenly there's this exponential growth in the defense that's possible then, because when you slide a guy down, him and Snead, suddenly then the third cornerback is improved because it's the guy who used to be the second cornerback. It's kind of similar to the wide receiver situation. Lost Holmes asks, is the Karlaftis and Jalen Watson review possible? I might try to get there during the bye week. I'm not sure. The day job, to be perfectly honest, you guys, is kind of blowing up on me. Next week might be really tough to get a lot of extra stuff in. And it might be a bye week for me too, but we'll see how it goes. I love reviewing guys as much as possible. Patty Bomb says the team completely remodeled the secondary and linebacking group. When do you think they finish the remodel of the D-line to round out the whole defense? In that mind, do they re-up Chris Jones in the offseason? They better. He's playing unbelievable. It's going to cost a lot of money to keep him, but you keep elite players if at all possible. And I understand, they did what they did with Tyreek Hill. I understand that. That's not, to me, a model for long-term success if you do it every time. I think you do it sometimes in certain scenarios, like, for example, if you have an absolutely elite quarterback, maybe hanging on to that elite wide receiver isn't quite as important, depending on, because you already have Travis Kelce, all that stuff. You don't do it with every elite player, in my opinion. And I think Chris Jones walking would be a mistake. I think this defense without Chris Jones is entirely different and bad. Chris Thrasher asks, when does Blake Bell come back? I called him Belladonna for some reason. No idea if that was an intending to insult him, maybe, or just a typo. I'm not sure. They've been talking about him like they're optimistic about him coming back soon, but that's all I know. Dylan Odell says Andrew Wiley's had a murderer's row of pass rushers to handle this season. Granted, he's had chips and Andy Reid scheming help along the way. Given his performance up to this point, do you think Reid is going to be quick to put Niang back in once healthy or no? Two things. One, we don't know when Niang is going to be healthy again. We really aren't hearing a ton about that. We've heard some comments here and there, but I have no idea if he's going to be healthy and ready to go this season. Two, no, I don't think they're going to be in a hurry to put him back in there. Niang wasn't, prior to getting hurt last year, he wasn't really playing any better than I think Wiley is right now. Wiley is an average offensive lineman. Sounds like an insult. It's a compliment. That is not easy to be. The thing with being average is, people expect this. It's kind of similar to the running game analysis, right? Where you don't, you expect this, but really it's this. And that's what you're going to see with an average offensive lineman. MJ Masterson asks, can we move Leo Chanel to a pass rush specialist role these next two games without Frank Clark? Would we be able to run a competent base defense with Chanel as an edge and Bolton, Gay, and Harris at linebacker? I don't imagine they're going to do that. I think if they thought that Leo Chanel could play any sort of defensive end position, they would have tried it by now. His college didn't try it. The pros aren't trying it. I just don't think that that's really within his skill set. Maybe, but that seems to be more like a dream based on traits than a reality based on what he's put on film. AJ Nightingale says, assuming Snead and McDuffie are your starters moving forward, how do you mix in Fenton, Watson, Williams, who sees the most playing time? I think that Jalen Watson has played well enough, consistently enough, to have a chance at that third corner spot. I think it would be between him and Fenton. Williams has made some strides. That's great. And it's a good problem to have. I understand Fenton had some problems earlier this year. He wasn't playing as well as he normally was. But he has been a consistently okay corner for multiple seasons, depending on who you ask. I've always been fine with how he plays. It's when he's matched up, one-on-one consistently on the boundary, they're going to have problems. He's better as more of a zone guy. If they want to shift to more man-based stuff, which they might, although McDuffie's more of a zone guy, but he can do both. Snead can do both. Then Watson or Williams makes a lot more sense given their particular skill set. MJ Masterson also asked, can you rank these defensive linemen in terms of trade price? Josh Allen, Cam Jordan, Brian Burns, Bradley Chubb, Darren Payne. Darren Payne I don't think is available, and I don't think Brian Burns is available. I think both those guys would require at least a first rounder. Cam Jordan's contract would be really hard to fit under the salary cap for the Chiefs, but I think you could probably get him for like a third rounder or something. The Saints are never sellers, though, it feels like. Josh Allen, I don't think the Jags are selling, but I think you'd have to send a first round for that. Bradley Chubb, he's an interesting option to me because he's in the last year of his contract. Doesn't seem likely that he's coming back. The Broncos look like a disaster. I don't think they're dealing right now, though, because they were all in this year, and there's no way they're ready to accept the apparent fate that is awaiting them. So really, all of those guys, you're going to have a fairly a fairly high trade price, or they're a division rival that is unlikely to trade with you, barring, some kind of horrifyingly bad deal, or there's someone like Cam Jordan with a contract that just doesn't make it work. Chowder asks, is the run defense free fall a result of poor play, or is it a series of good opponents? Yes, though the Bills game should give you pause. They have not been running the ball well. They ran the ball real well against the Chiefs. That was more of a game plan thing. They zigged when they expect them to zag, but still definitely concerning. Got time for a few more. We're trying. PG says, how would you rate the performance of the defense given the circumstances and the rookie class relative to your expectations of the preseason? I would say the defense has been okay, considering the complete turnaround, what they're trying to do and having a youth movement. It's been okay. It's been a little better than I expected. Not a lot better, but a little better than I expected, particularly with the secondary. The back end's been better than I expected. Pass rush has been about what I expected, although the blitz packages have been better than I thought they would be. And they've executed some of Spag's stuff a little bit better. So that's good. In terms of the rookie class, that's kind of a related thing. They've been a little better than what I was expecting. Not far and away better. It's going to depend on what we see from McDuffie. Oh, excuse me, it's a worry when I do this. One thing that the Sky Moore stuff, they got to stop having him return punts and let him get involved in the offense. Every time he has the ball thrown to him, other than when Mahomes is either making a throw he shouldn't, or when he makes a mental error like what he had against the Niners, he showed off his skill set. But that pick that Mahomes threw against the Niners, when he was expecting more to wrap around the defender, so you've got the underneath defender, he's expecting him to kind of wrap around him here, but instead he traveled a little farther upfield, which allowed the safety to come down and pick off the ball. That's the type of mental error that you see from rookies, and might be what's keeping him off the field a little bit more. That's just how it works, and that's what they're going to have to figure out. But he's someone who is going to play a big role in how the rest of this year plays out with the rookie class. Brian Larson asks, who are the options to pick up, especially on the D-line? A name I keep floating that's maybe kind of more of an average guy, but might be a guy that can help move the needle a little bit, would be Jerry Hughes. Low price. He's been relatively productive this year. He's been a decent pass rusher for a while. I could see him coming in and doing what Melvin Ingram did a little bit. William Shimonia asks, should the Chiefs bring back Kareem Hunt? I mean, they won't. I mean, at least not that I'm aware of. I don't think they would. I think he lied to them. Now, that said, time heals all wounds, and he's an exceptional running back. So, I mean, if you're going purely from a football standpoint, it's kind of a no-brainer. Kareem Hunt is who they're hoping Isaiah Pacheco can be one day. And that's a big hope, because, I mean, Kareem Hunt was Kareem Hunt like immediately. So, I mean, from a football standpoint, sure, but there's more that goes on there with football. Marcus Baker, and I think I am going to I think I'm going to have to be done here in just a moment here. But Marcus Baker asks, if you could execute one trade of your choice, who would you trade for and what would you give up? Be as realistic as possible. Well, there's a difference, the one trade of your choice and being realistic. Those are two very different things. If I could convince the Colts to be sellers, I would try to pry DeForest Buckner out of their hands, which, again, that's not super realistic. I think though that GM and that coach are fighting for their lives. But Buckner is done with dead money after this year, even though he's got a very expensive contract, and he's the closest thing to Chris Jones in the league. Aaron Donald exists on his own little thing, but Buckner is a stud. And so I would be willing to, I would call them and say, hey, you want a second rounder? That's what I would do. But I tend to value players over picks in that way. Russell Bingham asks, not sure how to ask this. I categorize football info as such. National, more likely to be objective but less informed. And local, less likely to be objective but more informed. Any advice how to parse the info to get the most accurate picture? I would ask yourself whether people are giving reasons for what they are saying. I don't know if national or local is any more likely to be objective. Local coverage, I mean, you'd be surprised at the number of people that cover local teams that aren't fans of that team. I'm a fan of the Chiefs. But I also think I'm probably more objective in how I cover most aspects of it than a national guy that hasn't watched a second of their film. So, you're going to get more info there, at least ideally. But I think the big thing is not necessarily asking yourself whether someone is subjective or objective, but asking yourself the why. What reasons are they giving for the analysis that they're providing? And that really is much more. You want to look at the analysis, not the person. Now, obviously, a history of being trustworthy gives someone a little more credibility and stuff, but that's how I would parse it in, okay, what are they saying and what's the rationale behind it? Is it just a bunch of football cliches? Is it based on just one play and then they're extrapolating it to a bunch of things? Or are they saying, I watched a bunch of things and I'm using this one play as an example? There's a big difference. Is it someone that, like Lewis Riddick, like someone who would know Andy Reid, like things like that. Those things really, really matter. And that's kind of how I would try to parse it. I had a couple questions about Sky Moore. I already covered it a little bit. And people were talking about, can't be the only one being nervous of Pickens. I liked Pickens. I would have picked Pickens or Sky Moore. I kind of viewed them as in the same category of player, just different level, different types of skill sets. Pickens is having a lot of success early. We'll see what happens with Moore. A lot of it depends on how things go down the stretch. I like the skill set he shows on film. The punt return stuff has been weird. I personally don't think he should have been put in as the punt returner. I don't think that is the skill set that he necessarily showed in college. He never did it in college, and you're seeing the results of that. I don't think it set him up to succeed. I would love it if they kind of ended that experiment. So I think that I'm going to do one more because this is just kind of a what if. Mike Rodwald asks if Hill catches that overtime deep third down pass in the AFC Championship game versus the Bengals, and the Chiefs go to the Super Bowl and beat the Rams. Is Hill still on the team this season? And that's the question that I'll close with, because my answer might surprise you. I don't think so. I think what happened with him wasn't because of their view of his skill set. It wasn't due to their opinions of him as a player. I think it was a shift in how they are looking to build. They've kind of maxed out everything they could do in terms of Mahomes' relatively cheap years, and they knew they needed to reload in terms of draft picks. And he was by far the most obvious way to do it once it became clear that they couldn't really make it work money-wise. I think that would have happened regardless. And that's just how it goes sometimes with elite players, but not all the time. Please extend Chris Jones for the love of God. All right. I already went longer than I should have. I appreciate everyone, watching. Please make sure to, like, subscribe, join, do all the things that Ryan tells you to do, because Ryan's actually a professional and I'm not. Make sure to check out what they're doing at the NFL 33 Substack. Check out what I'm doing at the Chief of the North Substack. There's an article there on Chris Jones playing defensive end very successfully lately, because they're doing it selectively. You should check that out. It's actually unlocked for everyone to read. It's mnchiefsfan.substack.com. You can go check that out, see what you think of it. I appreciate everyone watching. I'm just excited for where the Chiefs are at. Had you asked me before the season, will you take 5-3 or 5-2 at the bye week? I would have said absolutely, even though the way they got here was a little bit weird. So we'll see you guys next week. Hopefully you will have a wonderful bye week, get a little rest, just enjoy football stress-free. It's a great week to be a Chiefs fan.